Hey guys, and welcome to a battle featuring myself in charge of the mighty legions of the Dowie up against Roman Potato, an awesome name, and leading a awesome forces of Bretonnia here, going very cav heavy, bad to the bones elite troops. We are going to be on Stir River, and I wanted to showcase this game for you guys today to focus on a underused unit in the Dowie forces, which I think have a really nice niche application here, and that is the mighty organ gun. These bad boys are basically four smaller cannons strapped together, fantastic at taking out cavalry as well as infantry, and I think they're certainly suited up against the Bretonnian forces. And we do have two of the bad boys here, one either side of a mighty cannon. Now, the reason I like organ guns in this matchup is not only are they good up against cav as previously stated, they're also very devastating to peasant bowmen and can tear them down very, very quickly. So I think overall they're certainly suited for dealing with the forces of Bretonnia. Now, to protect our heavy artillery investment here, we have triple Slayers, one of which is going to be the Dragonback Slayers, Regiment of Renowned version, who do slow down the enemy as well, as they're having a much cooler name as well. So, all good stuff there. For the main battle line, we are going to have to go relatively cheap and cheerful due to our heavy investment in Slayers and artillery pieces. So we do have a few units of Longbeards, but for the most part it is going to be miners with blasting charges. We also have the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass in the front line holding it down. So a couple of units of Longbeards, Dragonfire Pass, and I believe 4 units of miners with blasting charges. Blasting charges do pretty good at tearing apart the infantry forces of the Bretonnians, and I quite like to use them in a secondary line to ensure they get all of their charges off. Now, for leadership core here, we of course have Ungrim Iron Fist. Most consider him to be the worst Dowie Lord, but with a glorious hairstyle mohawk such as that, I think he's got to be secretly the best, and I'm determined to prove it despite how many times he costs me a game. And he's going to be coming with Deadly Onslaught and Foe Seeker, and he's going to be run dirty with a Runesmith, coming with Rune of Negation, Rune of Wrath and Ruin, as well as the Hammer of Karak Drazar, one of my favourite items, which I think doesn't get used anywhere near enough. It, for 50 seconds, does indeed lower 30% base weapon damage and 40 melee attack, basically making a unit completely useless as far as damage output goes for a considerable time. We're taking a defense position on the hill here. Now, for my opponent standing across the swamp-ridden fields from me, they've gone bad to the bones with foot squires in the front line, and this is certainly a decent way to play Bretonnia. I think it's quite a tough matchup for them in general, but these guys do come with nice anti-infantry armour piercing, so they should be good up against the majority of the Dowie foot troops. We do also have a bucket ton of questing knights, so it looks like we have 2 on this left-hand flank. They're anti-infantry, which of course is good against the dwarf forces. You don't need any of that anti-large, and we have triple questing knights on the right-hand flank as well. Looks like 2 of them are going to be wrapping up and around this hill to try and ambush me and get that lovely downhill charge. My opponent also has double-filled trebuchet. Certainly can get fantastic value up against the dwarfs. A bit risky at the same time. Of course, cannons far more accurate and can outshoot the trebuchets rather well. But if you put decent enough pressure on the dwarf opponent, you should be able to get in there, disrupt their artillery, and allow these guys to do good damage. Mainly because dwarfs, for example, aren't going to be bursting across the field very quickly to shut them down, although this build is very susceptible to gyrocopter play all round, but luckily for my opponent I have not brought any. We have the Fey Enchantress, I would say on foot, but she's kind of floating through the air here. She is going to be coming in with the Chalice of Potions, which is pretty damn awesome. We'll hopefully see that in play. It's basically a free Comet of Cassandora. We have the Dwellers Below, Regrowth and Earthblood, obviously to keep those knights alive. Interesting to see how the Dwellers does perform. Without further ado, let's get this battle underway, and you can see the rocks are being launched by the field trebuchets at the moment, as my forces are going to have to start advancing slightly. I want to get the organ guns in range of some key targets. Longbeards have already started to take a pounding. My cannon is going to be answering in kind, however, to the field trebuchet, doing pretty decent damage, making these guys waver as well, not quite break off the field, but all still 3 artillery pieces are firing, which is pretty dangerous for me. As you can see, the Quest Knights are taking the first few volleys from the organ gun here, who, if once gets his kind of eye in range, can start to do some really decent damage. And you can see it's all starting to add up. Already killed quite a few models off these questing knights, putting some nice early pressure onto them, as in the distance you can see the field trebuchet is now down to 2 models. Question Knights on the left-hand flank are getting decimated by the Orn Gun, already up to 14 kills up against the elite cavalry. It looks like they have decided to take a little break from their duking, and this is going to be a big problem for them all round, as if they get caught tripping just for a few seconds, they will get torn apart, and as you can see, they're collapsing. Although, unfortunately for me, a lot of artillery pieces tend to focus on the edge of units rather than the middle, which would give them way more kills. On the right-hand side, my opponent has a nice little kind of switch and swap tactic. Does come clambering with one unit of Quest Knights to open up the back line for the second one to come in. However, unfortunately for him, we do pop down a Rune of Wrath and Ruin, as well as the Hammer, basically neutering these Quest Knights, allowing the Dragonback Slayers to pull them down. And I do manage to pull over a second unit of Slayers to try and protect the Organ Gun. However, good micro by my opponent is going to be coming with the Quest Knights, and is quite heavily compromising the cannon here, with only Ungrim in defence. Front line is starting to get underway here, as Longbeards do charge to meet the foot squires, and with the assistance of the miners with blasting charges, we should be able to trade relatively effectively, and at least hold the line, allowing my long-range troops to deal some super damage to the cap. More blasting charges are coming in. You'll see a Rune of Negation has been popped, as one of the Orn Guns has spun around face here, and is starting to unload into some Quest Knights once more, clearly lining up their shots, and as you can see, a salvo is going in, doing some pretty decent damage. These guys kind of lurking in the trees here and trying desperately to get a charge in, but the Runesmith is here to try to intercept if possible. Quest Knight's stomach does fail them before they manage to get in. However, the other cannon has been shut down, as well as the Organ Gun. Consistent pressure coming in by these Reaving cavalry floating around my back line, being general pain, is making me really stretch out with these Slayers. I'm trying my best to hold a tight formation, but it's pretty tough here. I do manage to get the Organ back onto its artillery piece so it can start once again putting pressure into the Questing Knights. However, the one on the right hand side is now slightly isolated with just some miners here for protection and a ton of angry cavalry coming in. So the miners are going to be trying to intercept where possible, just block in these Quest Knights and try and allow time for the Slayers to come back into the fold. In the front line, foot squires are actually starting to struggle quite badly here due to the massive damage that came in from those miners with blasting charges. Both Dragonfire Pass and miners are starting to trade pretty upward and effectively up against these foot squires. You can see the second Orn Gun is online, protected by a unit of Slayers, and is now shooting Quest Knights in the rear, which is all good for me. The other Orn Gun is slowly starting to be overrun. Quest Knights are hit with a Rune of Wrath and Ruin, and it looks like the Orn Gun's resolve is just about going to stand. Nope, as I say that, they actually start to rout, but the Rune of Wrath and Ruin is going to allow some Slayers to catch up here and start dragging many of these knights from their steeds. Earthblood, though, is popped on top of them as a nice countermeasure, and they do manage to escape relatively unharmed there. We do have the Dragonback Slayers actually assisting the front line here, chewing through foot squires, and though they're not designed to kill infantry, they can actually do a pretty decent job. They just lose a lot of numbers for it as well. One unit of Quest Knights has now been completely shattered here, bringing dishonour to the forces of Bretonnia, as I try desperately to rally around the Organ Guns. Foot squires here are slowly chewing through miners and Longbeards, but Longbeards just have such good duration and staying power. Up to 40 kills up against great weapon troops is certainly no joke. Miners in the centre pocket have been overrun by the Fey Enchantress as well as some Questing Knights here. However, the Runesmith with his Rune of Negation certainly helping out to push off these last foot squires, and the balance power does go quite heavily in my favour. However, we're looking a little thin on the ground as well. If I've learned anything from Dowie, it's that even though you have fantastic staying power and durability, you can get picked off in the late game unless you unify your forces. And as you can see, I am relatively spread out, and there's still a lot of cavalry left on the field. In the distance, both field trebuchets have been firing non-stop, up to only 10 and 38 kills, however. They're not the most accurate in the world, and they haven't had too many perfect targets, don't have a crazy amount of elite infantry here. It's kind of hard for them to make too much value at the moment. Longbeards and mines have now been broken as the foot squires get the favour of the Fey popped on them, up in their melee attack to a whopping 65, going to really help them chew through my units with deadly efficiency, and they are rallying hard here to the Fey Enchantress. We can see one of the Comet of Cassandoras, which is actually the Chalice Potion, or Potion of Chalice, whatever it's called, is going to be dropping down, but I managed to spot it as the Orn Guns do start to flee, taking a little bit of damage there. But another Rune of Wrath and Ruin was popped on these Questing Knights, stopping them from taking advantage of the situation, and now we're going to unload a few more volleys into them as well, as they do indeed retreat. We have 2 units of Slayers, who are, one of which is relatively healthy, the other quite beat up into this late game. Now going to be falling back to the Organ Gun, as the Runesmith and Ungrim do waddle over as well. See if we get any last-ditch volleys. Bam! Straight into the flank of the Quest Knights. Fell in 4 or 5 models there in one volley. Up against such a elite cav, such good value. Slayers as well as Miners have managed to pin in the Fey Enchantress, and the Quest Knights do come in for a desperate charge and attempt to save their Liege Lord. And one thing my opponent's been doing fantastic all the game is hitting and running with these Questing Knights. I think they can stay in a little bit longer sometimes, just to ensure you get all that damage, but he's been bouncing around the combats where possible, really starting to break off my troops. At this point, we are rallying to the high ground here, trying to make Obi-Wan as proud as possible, and getting on top of this last Organ Gun, which is now up to a whopping 94 kills, triple bronze chevron, and it's been focusing down pretty much solely cavalry, so 94 kills is some pretty insane stuff. The other Organ Gun is about done for at this point. Quest Knights are going to be cleaning it up. A couple of Miners have returned with some blasting charges, just going to be launching them in on top of the Quest Knights, trying to get some damage where they can before they do go into the night here. One of the Trebuchet still has huge amounts of ammunition, which is a bit of a problem for me. They are starting to rack up the kills as Longbeards and Miners do start to flee. We still do have a decent amount of Slayers, however, which are good up against pretty much everything that the Bretonnian forces do indeed have left. Looks like one unit of Slayers still going strong here up against the Fey Enchantress, and Trebuchet is coming with some pretty heavy friendly fire as well, it would seem, as the Fae takes a bit of a beating there. Only 2 Slayers that do remain though, so she should be able to hold the ground, but seeing her own troops betray and flee her, she is going to throw in the towel there, and that is a Pyrrhic victory for Karak Kudrin. Very well played to Roman Potato. Really cool guy, actually. I was speaking to him in chat, and as I said before, loved the name. Coming in with an incredibly elite build, which up against the Dowie can sometimes suffer. And that is because the Dowie have a lot of troops which are relatively cheap, but have a lot of damage output, such as Thunderers. If I'd managed to box in all his forces and had a big onion build, I think it could have struggled, but that's why the field trebuchets are there as well, helping to focus down Thunderers, force the Dowie forces forward. One thing I assume he was not expecting was the mighty Organ Guns, who I think were a real MVP here. 38 and 94 kills, pretty much solely based on cavalry, is nuts when it comes to the fact that taking down the very, very expensive Questing Knights. Overall, the cannon did its job as well, putting pressure on the field trebuchet, forcing my opponents in as quickly as possible. That allowed the Miners, Longbeards to hold relatively well, actually, up against the Foot Squires. I've seen this tactic quite a few times, kind of bringing in the Foot Squires to attempt to overrun the Dwarf forces, but because you lack the numbers, you tend to slowly get ground down. You can see some of them got some okay kills, but overall, the Longbeards traded very effectively up against those guys. Miners came with the blasting charges to do good HP damage, and the Slayers, of course, always fantastic at taking down cavalry, and Ungrim rules victorious today. Alright guys, hope you did enjoy. If you did, feel free to give the video a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more Total War Warhammer content. If you want to see your replays up on the channel or support the channel in any other way, there are links to my Discord and other ways to support the channel in the description down below. Alright guys, until next time, peace, and as always, stay awesome.